Welcome to Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. I'm Julia Elliott Brown, the founder and CEO of Enter the Arena. I'm a serial entrepreneur and an expert in raising investment and business growth. Our mission at Enter the Arena is to empower female founders to fly through pre-raise and investment and onto the exponential growth of their business with investment expertise and business coaching. Here we share the stories of inspirational female founders who've raised investment to inspire you to do the same. You'll hear their honest accounts of what it was really like to secure funding, the highs, the lows, and the challenges they experienced on the journey. And along the way, we'll discuss top tips for how you can be successful too. So today I'm speaking with Polly McMaster, the founder behind modern luxury workwear brand The Fold, helping women dress for success. The Fold's mission is threefold: elevating workwear, empowering women, and championing ambition. They're a direct-to-consumer brand serving over 80 countries online with a flagship store in Chelsea in London. Now, in 2013, Management Today voted Polly as one of the 35 under 35 most influential businesswomen. And in 2022, she was selected as one of the Lloyds Development Capital top 50 most ambitious business leaders. She has a PhD in molecular biology from Cambridge University, pretty impressive, and an MBA from London Business School. And Polly recently raised £1.6 million of investment at a whopping £30 million valuation, bringing her total amount raised now to £11 million. So let's meet Polly and find out all about her journey with The Fold over the last 12 years, how she's raised investment and what she's learned along the way. So welcome to the show, Polly. It is so good to see you. It's been way too long.
Thank you very much for having me, Julia. It's great to be able to share some of this story.
Finally, we get to catch up. So I'm going to go back to the beginning because you're from a corporate background, like many successful entrepreneurs are, and your field was in consulting and finance. So what was it that you noticed in your corporate career that made you want to take this leap into the crazy world of startups, and why this particular venture?
It really started as early as my very first day at work, actually, because I'd been really excited to go and, leave the world of science and laboratory work and go into the city. It felt very exciting and glamorous. And I thought, I love clothes, I love fashion. And I had this vision of sashaying into the office in a really fabulous suit and just looking $1 million. And when I went shopping for my first suit to sort of really deliver on this vision that I had, I was really shocked and disappointed. I couldn't believe that the offering was so poor for women's workwear. And it really sort of stayed with me for quite a while that every time I went shopping, every time I was looking for something, the brands that I was looking at, those that were available to me, just didn't really feel like they understood my needs as a consumer. And I think what really struck me was that seemed very odd because as far as I could see, there was a sort of growing population of, really career-focused, incredible women climbing the ladder or, becoming more and more senior. We were wearing our workwear. In those days, it was definitely 5 days a week in the office, and it was quite formal. And I thought, if we're wearing our clothes 5 days out of 7, and you've got money to spend because you're working in this professional environment and, earning a really good salary, how odd that there isn't a better choice for the clothes that you would be then wearing to stand out in a good way. So that was really the first spark of inspiration for The Fold.
And I think it was back in 2011 when you started, actually, which was a couple of years after I started my last business, which was the design your own shoe company, Upper Street. And just to give the listeners a bit of context, our brands partnered for a few seasons. Your amazing clothes with our amazing shoes. I love The Fold, and I've got a number of items from your collection in my wardrobe. You bore witness to my own fundraising endeavours over the years, and I know that you'll very much remember when I crowdfunded for Upper Street, which was quite an experience. So we're gonna chat about your own crowdfund, your recent crowdfund, in a minute. But let's first of all talk about the early days of fundraising. I know in the early days you bootstrapped a little bit, but it wasn't long before you did go out and get your first angel funding round, wasn't it, Polly? So tell us about that. How did you approach that first fundraise?
So absolutely, as you say, way back in those early days, I'd finished the MBA and I was working with a business partner called Cheryl. And she and I had really used the whole of the MBA as a giant sort of experiment project on the concept that would eventually become the Fold. And in a way, that put us in really good stead because we were able to use all of the different things about marketing, and there were lots of entrepreneurship classes, and we effectively wrote a business plan while we were at business school for the Fold. I mean, it was very out of touch with what I've since learned as the reality, and it was, probably very naive, but it was still a good sort of basis for really thinking through what the business could become, and we did a huge amount of research. When we graduated from business school, she moved to New York. And at that point, we'd put a bit of our own money in, and we'd done a few sort of trials, like minimal viable product type trials. Could we at least sell anything to anyone? We had some sort of studio made sort of little bit of a clothing line to just start experimenting and seeing how it could go. And when she was in New York, we started the conversation with some different investors. And that was the beginning of the more sort of the fundraising journey, and also how the Fold then evolved. So what was quite interesting was that there were a couple of themes that came out of that straight away, which was, okay, so one of you is based in London and one of you is based in New York. How is that going to work? You guys are right at the beginning of this journey. You're sort of effectively pre-revenue. Without being rude, you don't really know what you're doing. I would highly suggest that if you're going to do something, let's keep it simple. You need to start from one city first. And of course, we were no, we can do it. We were sort of blindly optimistic about it. And then as this pattern started to repeat itself, we, finally listened and took it to heart. Cheryl ended up going off and working for another startup, and I carried on with the Fold. So we both got to go on a startup journey, but it ended up being different startups, and we're still in touch today. So it was, our friendship has remained really strong. So from my perspective, though, I was then based in London doing it on my own, and definitely needed to raise investment in order to take the business forward. I think for anyone listening who may be working on a sort of retail type project or something where there's physical inventory involved, one of the things that we learned quite quickly is that it's a cash hungry business. So although we could sort of bootstrap it for a while, and we sort of had some tasters of some manufacturing models to try and invest less upfront in stock, the bottom line is that the consumers expect to have a bit of a choice of product. They want it quite quickly, and we needed to be able to invest in the stock to be able to deliver that. Also to be able to grow, so to fund your working capital cycle effectively. And when you're starting out, it's not like you can do that from a bank loan. You need to really be able to do that from equity because you've got no track record and you've got no profits to back up your story. So angel investment at that stage seemed like the best route. And at that point, it was then me going out to try and find angel investors to back the story. This is another interesting little factor because I think I'd also thought, well, the obvious type of angel investor for this would be some great female investors, because the product that we're doing, the story that we're telling is about these incredible women who are very career focused, really high flying. And surely some female investors will really resonate with that because it might very much be part of their own story, during their professional career. And it was quite shocking to me, again, that there really weren't that many female angel investors, and finding them in the networks and sort of accessing that group of women actually felt very challenging. It tended to be angel networks which were very male dominated. If I was talking to male angel investors, I got quite a few different themes of conversation, but one was often, well, that's interesting. So, imagine this is a man of a certain age who's, because he's an angel investor, is naturally quite wealthy. And so his experience of life is, well, my wife doesn't work. And she doesn't really, so she doesn't really need product like the Fold because she's not a professional woman. And, so I don't really understand what it is you're trying to do, or, why this is such a problem out there. And so frankly, so then it was just a no, because there was no real understanding of the commercial opportunity, the consumer who was looking for this type of product. And obviously that was quite demoralizing story to hear.
I always find that fascinating, really, that an investor, if they don't understand it from their own personal experience, it's just so easy to say no. It does make it very challenging, doesn't it, when you're building a product or a service which isn't for your investor.
I think that's right. And actually, something that I feel like I've learned along the way is the best place to start looking for those type of angel investors is to find that common ground. And the things, I wish I knew then is trying to build that network before you're doing the angel investing, which of course is difficult because if you need the angel investing to get going, there's a bit of a, catch 22 there. But in an ideal world, to build up some relationships with either people in the industry or, professional women or people who could have that common ground, let's say with the product or service that you're trying to offer, is actually really helpful, because then when it comes to a conversation about investment, they're already up the curve a bit about the type of person you are, how dedicated you are to the problem. You've already been through it a few times from a more sort of general sense. And then I think it's much easier to get them on board. But I do think that common ground is quite important, whether it be the sector that they like or the sector they've got experience with, or maybe they're the consumer, because otherwise you're trying to convince them of something that they don't have either a professional or a personal understanding of, and it just makes the conversation a bit harder. And you're inevitably going to get lots of no's anyway, so trying to find any which way that you can to make that conversation a bit easier is always going to help.
Yeah, I totally agree. Never too early to start networking, and push on doors that are going to open more easily, not those ones that are stapled or nailed shut. So some challenges there. So where did you find your first investor?
So eventually, after about 5,000 cups of coffee with different people, I did finally meet these two women who were absolutely the women I was describing that I was looking for. So they were able to resonate with what the product opportunity and the commercial opportunity was. They'd done a bit of angel investing already, so this wasn't their first rodeo. They'd got to know me during the course of the conversations about investment. And, finally, they were just the two who were willing to sort of take the plunge. And what was quite nice is they sort of ended up coming in, separately, but together. So it was sort of like a very mini little round, but the two of them all doing the diligence and the conversation together. It probably made it a little bit harder for me on the negotiation front. But at the end of the day, it's interesting because so many times, you might be talking to lawyers or different people, and they might be saying, well, that's not necessarily the best deal. You might be giving too much away or this or that. But what I've certainly lived through is you don't always have a ton of choice. And there's a point at which you have to go, look, if I really want to do this and this is the opportunity I have, is it good enough for me to, to do it and to keep going? And that was definitely the decision that I took.
Yeah,
and I think
good point about good. I mean, good point about good enough. I mean, I would say, we always encourage our founders to strive to find the perfect fit, but like trying to find a husband, there is no such thing as the perfect fit. So good enough. I think. What is that bar? But being clear yourself about what that bar is, because what you don't want is somebody who is really not a good fit, and you're doing it because you feel desperate. There's a fine line, I think, there.
I think another learning I'd probably have is I think I always remember feeling in a bit of a rush. And it was sort of a rush because I had a sort of intern who I'd said, look, I can't employ you fully until I've raised some money because I'd be sort of leading you on. I needed to get the investment in before I could take on employees and do things properly. And, I was hungry because I was ambitious. And I think that drove a lot of the sort of the rush factor. But I probably, if I could go back, I'd almost maybe just not feel that everything had to be such a rush. Why not just slow things down a bit? What was really driving that for me? I'm not sure that I could really say. And actually that might have made things feel a little bit less stressful at that time, or given you a bit of space to sort of look at the terms and look at the opportunity. On the other hand, I guess what I was also thinking was that in a way, raising that angel round was a bit of a gating moment for me, in the sense of I knew that if I couldn't raise that money, I would have to go and find a job or go back to my previous job. And it was very much if I can raise this money, this is the sort of proof to myself and to the business that there's a real proposition here. It's been validated. I've raised the money, and then I can get on with it. So I suppose that probably drove a bit of the sense of urgency in getting on with it, because for me it was the deciding moment of stopping or carrying on.
Makes sense. So you got that investment round secured, and that enabled you to then, really start growing the business. Tell us a little bit about the trajectory of the business after you'd raised investment. What happened over the next few years before you kind of needed to go out and do a more serious round?
I think the age old thing that people say of you're going to need much more money than you think was obviously true. So it wasn't long before I needed to go back to the same investors and say, actually, I'm going to need a bit more. But the business was growing. So what we were finding was that we were starting to test different marketing channels. We were starting to test different routes to market, and things were at least starting to work. So when we were then having those conversations with the investors again, at least that we were showing there was some progress and some traction. And I would say that we sort of limped along from sort of small angel round to angel round for probably a good 2 to 3 years while we top things up, would grow a bit more, top up again, grow a bit more, and every once in a while add a new shareholder into that round. So it was the first two investors who followed on, and then adding in a couple more angels. And of course, the more that you go through the journey, in a way, the easier it became to bring in a couple more angels along the way, because by then you've got a little bit more track record, you've got a little bit more sales, you've navigated a few twists and turns, so there's a little bit more proof that you're somebody who's backable and you're really committed to the journey. And I think that was really helpful. I think I would say 2015 was a real turning point for the brand for a number of reasons. At the beginning of the year, we actually did another angel round. And I have to say, so for anyone going through the sort of fundraising journey, it was probably one of the most painful moments that I've had in the business ever. And probably the second most painful was probably then COVID. So it was very, very difficult because I'd grown the business to a certain amount, but of course that made it even more cash hungry. So things were growing. It was sort of ticking along. It was doing all right. And, I was just desperate for cash, absolutely needed it. And of course, even though I'd left myself, easily sort of 6 months plus to raise the money, it just took forever. And I was sort of still chatting to different angels and trying to get people over the line. And it was sort of, I suppose the feeling was like, it was like herding cats. And it was like herding cats, but with this wall coming towards you of, how can you pay that bill? How can you pay that bill? And just the absolutely paralyzing fear of it every single day was really, really horrible, actually. And I would say it really affected me physically. Like I was sort of having the closest thing I could say to sort of panic attacks. I was really struggling to eat. I was really struggling to sleep. I found it very difficult to talk to people about because I felt quite sort of ashamed that I was in such turmoil about it all. And it was, you sort of, I guess at the end of the day, you just don't know if it's going to be all right. You don't know if you're going to get that investment over the line. And also, you're still the face of the brand. So you're showing up every day to your team and putting a big old smile on. And you're going out to more investors with a big old smile on saying, please come and back the business. But meanwhile, you're terrified that you're going to get it over the line. And a couple of months later, I did manage to get it over the line. And I do remember, and this is something I would say is a really big learning for me, is that there was just suddenly this moment where I had maybe 4 or 5 investors who were, ready to commit. But I realized I sort of had this moment of I'd set a bit of a target for what I wanted to raise, and I wasn't quite there, but I got most of the way there. And I just thought, do you know what? I actually just need to call it. I need to just say, great, okay, you're here. Let's stop worrying about the number that I said, and let's just get these people over the line. And if I can then top up and do, a second close because I find someone else, fine, I'll do it. And that was a real breakthrough moment for me. And I think what had been stopping me doing that was this sort of, but I can't do that until I hit exactly this number or that number. And just letting that go a bit and going, no, this is enough. This is absolutely enough for me to get going and, keep going. And
sorry, I was going to say, very, very wise actually to do that. It's good to set that kind of minimum, optimal, and then a stretch. I mean, I remember that time, Polly, because I think we were both raising at about the same time. I seem to remember quite a few
Absolutely.
glasses of wine, sobbing in corners of pubs, talking about it. It is
Exactly.
really stressful. If a couple of questions on that before we continue this story actually is, one is kind of, if you could go back and think about how you might have managed your stress more, how you might have managed your stress more differently, I'd love to know. And do you think there is anything you could have done to try and herd those cats a bit sooner?
So I'll take the second bit first. That's almost
Yeah.
maybe easier. So I think my learning was have sort of the piece of paper ready and keep it really simple. So if somebody's sort of bitten and shown a little bit of interest, have just the high level term sheet that says, great, here's a little blank line for you to write how much you're going to put in. Here's the high level terms of the deal, the valuation and, information rights and various other bits and bobs. And then just give it to them and then ask them for it back, and you're sort of done. And I think, although that sounds like really ludicrously simple, that step of doing that, then it felt quite hard to actually be like, oh, okay, you've said you're interested. Well, here's the piece of paper. Let's go and do it then. And that was just exactly what I needed to do. And actually, it shows them clarity, what they need to do. It makes it simple for them. All good things that they want to see from somebody running a business. So why it felt so hard to me, I don't know. And I think it's because, at the end of the day, it's about money, and it feels awkward, and you're sort of literally asking them for their money. And,
Yeah.
that
We
that
just have
feels
to
quite
get
sensitive.
comfortable with just closing, asking for the money
Exactly.
and closing it and doing it as you go.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. And actually
Yeah.
now, I mean, if you're doing it now, rolling closes are much more common now. There's the legal paperwork is there to make that easy.
That's
But
really
yeah,
interesting because, that would have really helped me, I think, sort of manage the situation a bit better. And of course, some angels, they want to wait and know that there is a bit of a round coming in together so that they know that you've got adequate amount, and I can understand that. But I think, just being a bit more comfortable and a bit more direct, great, here's the piece of paper, and then great, here are the bank details, let's go kind of thing. I think the other learning I would have about that is, at the time, and it was also driven by, I suppose, the funding resource I had in the business, but I didn't have someone helping me on the finance side. I only really had a bookkeeper. And although I had some, sort of operate experience from working in the industry, that doesn't make me a good finance sort of professional in the business. And so that probably would have helped because, for example, now I've got this, most amazing CFO, and obviously I couldn't have afforded her at the time, or, that kind of structure. But what it does help to do is sort of divide the conversation a little bit. Oh, great, we've, here's the story about the business, and come in, and then, they can sort of follow up with, well, great, here are some of the details. And it makes it feel a slightly more professional arrangement, and sort of helps maybe to balance out that conversation a bit, but also would have, I think, lowered my stress level about managing the cash flow. Because I think at the time, for example, asking someone if I could pay them a bit later or do this or that felt really terrifying. And actually, what I've learned is that's actually not an uncommon thing for people working in finance to do, to manage cash flow, to have conversations with suppliers, to help your working capital cycle a bit. And again, that would have just been reassuring. They could have been helping to, give me more information and just be a bit clearer about what levers we could pull or what opportunities we did have. So
yeah.
I think, again, that would have helped my stress level. In terms of managing the stress, honestly, I don't know. I mean, I would love to say that, I could have done a bit more self-care or whatever. But at the time, I mean, that just felt too much. It felt like I just have to get through this. I have to make it work. I have to put one foot in front of another and try and get over the line. And I sort of swore to myself I'd never let myself get in that situation again. But, lo and behold, COVID comes around, and, we're a workwear brand, and obviously people weren't going to work during COVID, and our sales, fell off a cliff. And by then the business was much bigger. So the cost base of the business was much bigger. Our cash burn obviously went, massively up, immediately, because our revenues had come down. And we just had to hunker down, and it was a really difficult time because we definitely needed cash to, even though we sort of really went to ground, we needed cash to get through that period of about a year. And although I'd sort of said, oh, I'll never get myself physically so sort of stressed about that situation again of raising money, it was absolutely as stressful again during
Yeah,
that
but
time.
it was unprecedented, wasn't it?
It
I
was
mean,
quite
but this,
unprecedented. Yeah.
as entrepreneurs, there's always stress. Stress is always potentially there, and I think we do get better at handling stress because it just becomes something that we get used to. It's a sort of daily occurrence, isn't it? With all the, as an entrepreneur, you're dealing with uncertainty, big decisions. Everybody's asking you questions all the time. You never have enough information. You're kind of, it does feel, it doesn't matter how far on you are as an entrepreneur, actually, and you're now much further on the journey. You often feel like you're going around with a big blindfold on, not
Oh
really
yeah,
knowing what you're doing. So,
absolutely.
we do sort of slightly get used to it. But sometimes we have those periods in the business where you've just got to get through it. And it is easier on the other side. Often you then step into some new challenges, but they're different and it does get easier. Hello, it's Julia here. I hope you're enjoying this podcast episode. I just want to take a really short break in this interview to tell you about my best-selling book, which I know you're going to find super helpful as you think about and prepare for your own fundraising journey. It's called Raise, the Female Founder's Guide to Securing Investment, and it's available in paperback, hardback, on your Kindle, and now also as an audiobook. In this book, you're going to discover the answers to all the questions you might have around raising investment, and specifically how to overcome the challenges you might face as a female founder. The guide follows the 5-step process that I've been using with all my amazing clients that entered the arena since 2015, who've raised over £20 million in funding. And you'll find over 35 inspirational case studies of female founders who've successfully raised investment in the book. And you'll also get to hear my own story of raising over £2 million of investment for my last business, which wasn't without its challenges. So you can get the book on Amazon, on your Kindle, or on Audible. Just type in Raise, the Female Founder's Guide to Securing Investment, and you'll find it. You did, so you got through that challenge, you herded those cats, you got those angel rounds in. But there were some great things that happened along the way, weren't there? Let's talk about what happened, the Kate Middleton effect. Tell us about what happened when she wore one of your dress. I think it was a dress, wasn't it, she wore?
Absolutely. So, that difficult period was the first half of 2015. And then the second half of 2015, things got a lot better and a lot more exciting. So, like I said, the business was doing all right. And then we had a wonderful moment where, like you say, the now Princess of Wales was going to one of her events and she was wearing one of our dresses. And that was really quite a game-changing moment because it puts you on the world stage. A lot of people notice you as a brand. Consumers are, really excited to, even for that exact product, but also to look at the brand. And it's they're really important sort of turning points, I suppose. It doesn't solve everything or change the entire course of your business, but it's all of these little incremental steps that, help you keep stepping up and keep developing. And actually, it ended up being really helpful timing because we were in the midst of discussions with a new investment partner called Active Partners, who are a consumer-focused growth capital fund. And we were in quite serious discussions with them off the back of sort of doing the angel round. I'd already met them, but I'd said to them, look, let me get the angel round closed because we really just need to do that. And then let's pick up the conversation again after that. So we'd started discussions, and actually, that year was also very eventful on a personal level because then after closing the angel round, I started these discussions with this investment partner. I also became pregnant, which was interesting for then having the discussions with the investment partner, and was hoping to close the round by the end of the year. And so when we finally signed that deal, I was 36 weeks pregnant. I have to say, I think a lot of investors, and I have heard quite a lot of stories where people have walked away. I think that's a real shame. I also think it's a really challenging juncture. I can understand it's challenging on both sides. I think it would be naive of me to think that would then be very easy for them because there was, an unknown that I was entering into, and how was I going to handle that? So I did present them with a maternity plan, which was, this is how I'm proposing to handle it. I will be getting a lot of help. I'm going to be trying to take minimal time out of the business. And of course, as a, the prospect of becoming a new mother and explaining all of that in a very transactional way, feels quite odd and was quite difficult. But on the other hand, I really need that investment for the business to survive and turn the next corner. So I'm not prepared to walk away from these discussions. So I just tried to handle it in the most professional way that I could. And good for them. They really stuck with it, and they believed in me. And so my daughter was born in the January of 2016. And I would say I didn't have a lot of time off, sort of any, but it was very hard, but I did navigate it, and we ended up with this great new investment partner, and that was a really, really good thing for the business. And like you say, we then entered a period of lots of exciting growth. They continued to support the business over a number of years, and they're still our main investors. So we've sort of gone on quite a bit of a journey together, and then navigated some interesting times after that. But it was also just such an exciting turning point for the business, because it was a more significant investment. It also gave some validation to hiring and talent into the team, who were excited that we were backed by this sort of growth partner. And all of those things, things just started to get a bit easier. We started to find some routes to market. We started trading in the US, which led to a lot of growth. So lots of really exciting developments sort of during that period between sort of 2016 and COVID really was a very, very exciting time. And I've now got two children, so one child born in 2016 and one in 2018. During that time, that sort of investment horizon.
That's fun time. Gosh. So you were certainly busy, Polly. And so you've had those angels, you've had VCs, and we hear a lot of negative kind of stuff about VCs sometimes. They get a bit of a bad rep. I think it can be quite challenging for a consumer brand to secure venture capital funding. In the fashion space, also quite challenging. So what's your experience been like so far of dealing with VCs? How would you describe them in terms of the difference between working with a VC and working with angel investors?
So I think it's really the moment where it becomes a much more professional sort of level of governance and expectation in the business. And I think that's something you have to have your eyes wide open to when you go into it. So at the end of the day, if you take away the sort of commercial aspects of the business and the broader picture, at the end of the day, investors are there to invest in something, help to grow it and then make a return. So I suppose, again, it would be naive to enter that partnership without really just having that knowledge that at the end of the day, that is what their job is there to do. So they are there to support you and to help grow the business. And, especially in a small business, I think it's a really good sort of holistic relationship if you can have one, but also in the knowledge that they do have that remit at the end of the day, and you are answerable to them if you're going to choose to take that kind of investment into the business. And sort of be aware that does put the pressure on the growth trajectory. Setting, budgets are really important. Cash flow profiles really important, and they will have far more demands of you than a group of angel investors will. So I think it's really that two-way relationship, and we've had an excellent relationship with our investor. I think part of the reason for that is that as I said before, I've got this wonderful CFO, Emmeline Maxwell, and I suppose the approach that we've taken is always one of real transparency, probably slight over communication in board packs, sometimes some quite lengthy board packs and things like that, and really just being very honest with where we are and what we're doing, and bringing them along on the journey. And I'm sure there's lots of things that over time we could have done better, or we could, you never know how well you're really doing in terms of how you're running the business, because you're doing what you can. But I think that trying to foster that relationship has only been good for how we've then been able to manage the business as a board, and keep that good relationship going is, really just trying to be very open and honest and communicate along the way. And that's put us in good stead.
But that structure, that level of professionalism, as you say, the governance, so important. And I think, I remember when, with my last business, when we took on a VC, I couldn't wait for that. Actually, I welcomed it because I knew it would help catapult our growth. And I think it's something that it's worth founders thinking about much sooner rather than later. Actually, the sooner you can start putting in some of that structure about how you govern your organization, how do you, having a board of advisors, those kind of things, the better, because it sets you up ready for that path. Something I see happening quite a lot with crowdfunding, when people have gone straight to crowdfunding, is that they come out the back of that and there is no structure put in place to manage the business going forward. So it's still very founder led, often no board of advisors, no governance. And I think that can be quite a dangerous spot, actually, when you've got suddenly quite a lot of capital that you've got to deploy effectively.
Yes, that's a good point, actually. I think you're right, because I suppose the journey that we went on is having our angels on the board and then the growth capital investor on the board and a chairman. We've got a fantastic chairman called Richard Sims, who's a brilliant sort of navigator of the industry and really is so good at being such a great listening board for all of us. And having that sort of set up, for example, as a backdrop to doing the crowd, because we've done the crowd later, I suppose I didn't really consider, like you say, that some people are doing the crowd without that structure in place, and I think it's really essential, because you're already operating like a really professional sort of business, and I think that's very reassuring for investors. So they know that you've got all the right bits in place to make sure you're doing the right things with your growth and legally and for your team
Yeah.
and all your stakeholders.
Absolutely. And I imagine, so when the proverbial hit the fan with COVID, so you're not just navigating on that on your own, you're navigating that with some serious investors on board. What happened? How did you deal with such an unexpected turn of events for a business that's in work, kind of workwear, and we were all at home wearing our pajamas, possibly tracksuit bottoms if you were lucky enough to get out of your pajamas. What happened?
Yeah, it was tremendously difficult. We spent a lot of time with the board during the very first phases, because things were moving so fast and the developments were happening just pretty much daily. So it was looking at as many different scenarios as we could. I think so many people working in businesses, like any business really during that time, it was almost like a daily reforecast of the entire business model and cash flow forecast, working closely side by side with the finance team. And really it was about, as some of that was unfolding, what were the different approaches that we could take. And I think it really mattered to me that we didn't go dark on our customers, that we had a voice and that we tried to do the best that we could to trade through that time. So we hunkered down to an extent. We were really careful about our product. We traded hard where we could, and we tried to make the best of the types of product lines that we could. But where there was product that it was just like, this is, so for example, we had some occasion wear dresses. Well, everything was obviously cancelled, until goodness knows how long. So it was just going, right, just keep it back. We're not going to be able to sell it. So effectively mothball it. And at some point we will then be able to trade that through. And of course that put the pressure on cash, because your cash was tied up in your stock. You couldn't sell the stock. So that's hence, we needed the cash to not only manage, the cost of operating the business, even with furlough schemes and, really going to the minimal viable that we could do to operate the business. It was still about really managing cash. And when we were looking at cash sales start on a absolute daily, if not hourly basis. And then we did around, at that point, it was a convertible loan note with the Future Fund. So the government obviously put lots of different schemes in place. We leveraged the furlough scheme and the sort of bounce back type loans, but we needed a bigger injection of capital to navigate the longer period. And they finally came up with a scheme that was more suitable to our business, which was the Future Fund scheme. But you needed a main investor to match. So effectively, the investor would put in an amount and then the Future Fund would match it. And, because we had really fostered such a good relationship with our investment partners and our shareholders, I think it was easier for us to then approach that conversation and have their full support. So it goes to show that, the better relationships you can have with your investors, when there are times of need and things go, more difficult, you're more likely to be supported by them. So that put us in good stead for that. And actually, because we had that stock, and we were able to trade through that, and we got the money from the Future Fund. That really gave us a runway of, so that was 2020, and it was only in the spring this year that we went out to the crowd. So we were able to then use that runway for a decent 3-year period to continue to grow the business. And fortunately, although at one point during COVID everybody thought nobody would ever leave the home again, or wear high heels again, or ever get dressed up again, or do anything, obviously that's not what happened. And there was actually a really, really positive resurgence of people going back into the workplace, and we really have sort of seen a lot of growth come about since sort of we've waved goodbye to COVID, which has been absolutely brilliant. So
that's amazing. And what are people wearing into the office now? Has that changed?
It has actually. What we've seen, and obviously we're, a lot of the customers who are coming to us for our product, it's very high quality. They're quite investment prices. So these are pieces which you really sort of, it's a definitive choice to go, right, I'm going to buy that fabulous suit and I'm going to, wear it for a long period of time. But what we've seen is customers really embracing things that are more bold. I think ordinary feels a little bit boring at the moment. So they've gone for really great color, a lot of print, a lot of head to toe looks, so head to toe colored suiting. And it's almost like, if you're going to still do, let's say 1, 2, 3 days at home, then you can really embrace the comfort on those days and, feel just super relaxed when you're at home and sort of trawling through spreadsheets or whatever it is you're doing. But actually then if you've got 2 or 3 days in the office, just absolutely go for it. And people are going, well, I'm going to go to the office and then I'm going to make sure I go see my friends after work for dinner, or I'm going to go to the theatre or whatever. So pile it all in to those 2 or 3 days and really up the ante. So we've seen a lot of that being a real positive.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I couldn't agree more. I do love, sitting here in my tracksuit bottoms, but it is so exciting when you're kind of like, right, I'm speaking at an event. I can't wait. What am I going to wear? I love it more than ever, as you say, because it's such a unique thing to do. So let's sort of finish this story, by talking about your latest round then. So why crowdfund now, after all these years of all these other different types of funding? What's drawn you finally to come to crowdfunding?
I think for us, it was the really exciting proposition of being able to go out to our customers. So we'd taken the investment from angel investors, and as we've discussed, from a sort of more institutional investor, and they were all, part of that crowdfund. So you go into the crowdfund and you build a sort of cornerstone. So you're going into it already knowing that you've managed to secure some quite significant investment already from those partners who are already in the business. But it was really about going, actually, we've got these incredible customers. I mean, they are such amazing women doing extraordinary things every single day. And many of them are really, really loyal to the brand. And what better way to really bring them truly into the fold than by offering them the chance to invest? So it really felt like a great time to do that. And we had the most wonderful response. I think we got about 400 investors into the round in the crowd fund. And what was also really exciting for us is, obviously, as a brand where the big part of our message is about empowering women, we really wanted to see as many female investors come into the round as possible. And I think the statistics typically on the Crowdcube platform, which was the platform we raised through, is about 30% or under being the female investment proportion. And actually, we were really delighted to see that our proportion was more like 70% women coming into our round. And that's positive for the Crowdcube platform, because it means actually all those women are now part of that community, and hopefully will go on to look at other investments that are available, but also to show that you can really generate that interest now, and there are more women. And it's even if it's the first thing, it doesn't have to be a huge sort of game-changing moment, but just starting small and getting on that journey of becoming an angel investor, I think, is so exciting for people. And, to give them the opportunity of a business like ours feels like a nice way to do that. So, we're really thrilled, and it felt like the right moment to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, I totally agree. And I mean, as you know, I crowdfunded for my last business like a long time ago. I think we were the first fashion brand in the UK to do so. And it is exciting when you get customers on board. But this point you make about how it enables women who have the potential to invest to dip their toe into the water in a reasonably easy way. You know, they could put as little as £10 in. I mean, I'm sure they put way more than £10 in. But it's just, you know, I think a lot of women are very intimidated by this idea of investing. We need more women. We need more female angel investors. I think the only way we're going to really genuinely close the gender funding gap. And, you know, a brand like yours on a crowdfunding platform, you know, is such an important piece of that puzzle, you know, bringing all those women on board. So, you know, that in itself is an incredible thing, I'm sure. Never mind about your incredible business. But, you know, empowering those women to invest as well as empowering them to dress in amazing clothes. It's quite something, Polly.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we're really delighted with it. And as you say, I think, you know, going back to that theme of common ground, if you don't have, you know, grow the base of female investors or minority investors, you're just not then bringing more common ground into the equation. So until there is more of that, it'll be really hard for that funding gap to close, because you're just still going back to the same pool of investors with whom you don't have as much common ground. And it, again, is just a harder conversation then. So I think it's hugely important.
Well, so congratulations on that round. So what's next for The Fold? What are we going to see from you over the next few years, Polly?
We've got so many exciting opportunities. One near-term one is that we are looking to open more stores. So keep an eye out. And we've got one wonderful store in London so far, but the sort of rolling out a bit more of a retail story for the brand is really exciting for us. We also, I mentioned, we're quite international. We do ship to lots of countries, but actually the US is a huge market for us. It's 50% of our sales. So we'll continue to invest behind growth in the US market, which is really exciting for us. And then also just continuing on what's really our true north, which is at the end of the day, we're a product brand bringing amazing workwear and occasion wear to our fabulous customers. So making sure that we're offering a great range, you know, continuing to invest in that range and that development and our brand development and the partnerships that we have is really, really exciting for the business. So lots of things to come.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing your quite epic journey with us, Polly. And I can't wait to see what happens next. I feel like I immediately need to go to The Fold and buy myself a new outfit.
Absolutely. Please do. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks, Polly. Thanks for following Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. This content is all provided to you for free, so if you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe so you never miss another one. Enter the Arena has helped hundreds of female founders fly through pre-raise and investment and onto the exponential growth of their business. Our first-hand experience, expert guidance, and proven programs help female founders unleash the Wonder Woman inside. To see if we can help you do the same, head over to www.enterthearena.co.uk. I'm Julia Elliott Brown, and I look forward to talking with you soon.